Hi everyone, just waiting for everybody to come in. Welcome everyone to the Q&A that Roma Support Group has organised about outreach on the EU settlement scheme to the Roma community. It's great to see so many people here. And I think we'll keep this a fairly open meeting. So we're just going to make a short statement first on the toolkit that we published, and I'll introduce the panel, and then we can open the floor to a Q&A session. We'll be aiming for an hour, so we may overrun slightly, but we'll be aiming to finish at 2:30. And one thing that I'd like to mention is that we are doing a quick instant poll at the start and the end of the meeting to try and find out what people gained from the meeting and what people learned. So in a few seconds, while I'm introducing the panel, the first poll should appear on your screen, and you know, you don't have to fill it in, but it would be really helpful to us if you did. So Mihai is managing the poll, and he'll be able to tell you what the results were. I should also mention the session is being recorded for the benefit of anyone who wasn't able to attend. So if anyone is objects to that, please let me know in the chat. So I'm going to start with introducing the panel. I'm Ilse Mortensen. I'm a policy and campaigning worker for Roma Support Group. And we have three people on the panel who know an enormous amount about outreach to the Roma community and the EU settlement scheme. We've got Hayley Morgan, who's service coordinator on EU settlement scheme support for TGP Cymru. It's a charity that's worked with local authorities in Wales a lot on outreach to the Roma community. Hayley, can you just put your hand up? I think you're, yeah.
Sorry, I was just moving my my screen. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And also on the panel is Tanya Gessi, who's Roma Support Group's coordinator on the EU settlement scheme and the Kitana project, which supports the Roma community through Brexit. Tanya, I can't see you, but can you just put your hand up as well?
Yeah, hi everyone, Tanya Gessi, hi.
And we've also got Mihai Bika, who some of you may be familiar with because of the amount of work that he's done as a community advocate. He's also the Roma Support Group's other policy and campaigns worker, and works with me. Hi Mihai.
Hi everyone, glad to see you all here. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, so a couple of brief words about the toolkit first. Rory, we've also got Rory, one of our brilliant volunteers at Roma Support Group, on the call. Can you are you able to post the link, the toolkit link, in the chat, please? And I'm not going to screen share or anything because I'm not going to go into very great detail, but if we could just have the link in the chat, then people can look at the toolkit while we're speaking. So we've developed the toolkit for local authorities and for delivery organisations who are funded to support the Roma community in accessing settled status, but who need more information about effective outreach and about the common barriers that Roma people experience in accessing the settlement scheme. I'd like to thank the organisations in the Roma EUSS network who were involved in developing the toolkit. We developed it because there have been concerns from the beginning of the announcement of the settlement scheme that Roma people were a particularly vulnerable group where accessing settled status is concerned, and that there are a lot of barriers in this community to first getting settled status and secondly managing their status under the settlement scheme. Now you may know this already, but there are an estimated 200,000 Roma in the UK, according to the 2012 census, which is a while ago now, so we don't know exactly how many people there are. Most are from Poland, Romania, Slovakia, or the Czech Republic, although there are a couple of other countries in Eastern Europe where Roma people come from to the UK. It's hard to reach people through high-level Home Office campaigns because there is often a language barrier, and people don't follow UK media very closely. And people need a lot of support as well in accessing and managing their status. The most common barriers are language and literacy, and digital access. Around 20% of Roma people, only around 20% of Roma people have their own handsets and the hardware that they need to access the settlement scheme. Lack of valid ID is also a common issue, which we'll talk about later in terms of how to manage that. And there are also barriers that are specific to Roma children in accessing the EU settlement scheme, because their parents are often unaware that they have to apply. So the toolkit is set up to point up some of these barriers and give indications of how to manage them. There are a lot of resources and a lot of links to resources and organisations that can help. One key point I'd like to make about delivering the settlement scheme for the Roma community is that councils and delivery organisations like yourselves should be working with organisations that already support the Roma community, or Roma advocates, ideally, like Mihai, who speak the language, are rooted in their local area and local community. Because even though they might not be funded to deliver the EU settlement scheme, they'll be an invaluable resource to you, both on outreach and referrals. And again, there's signposting to many of those organisations in the toolkit on the second last page. And I hope you'll use it. We can, if there aren't any organisations in your local area, then please do contact us and we'll see if we can help. Yeah, and the last thing I'd like to point to is the form at the end of the toolkit, which is there specifically to help people manage their settled status, and to help advisors support people in managing their settled status. If you print that out and help people to fill it in, that will go some way towards helping people access settled status when they need it in other situations, like applying for benefits or using the right to work tool and so on. So that's pretty much it on the toolkit. You're welcome to ask questions later. Before we go to Hayley for a short statement on her work in Wales, Mihai, do you have did you finish the poll, and is there anything you can say about the results? I can't see anything on my screen.
So yeah, we finished the poll, and we've asked everyone if they know which organization in the local area supports Roma community, and 63% of the respondents said that they know, while 37% said they don't know which organizations are working with the Roma communities in their area.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll have a few more questions, which will come towards the end of the meeting today.
Yeah, great. Okay, Hayley, do you want to say a couple of words about the work you've been delivering?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ilse. Hi, everybody. So as Ilse said, my name is Hayley Morgan, and I work for the Travelling Ahead project at TGP Cymru. So we support the Roma community across Wales, and one of the primary points of support that we give is around the EU settlement scheme. So, you know, we're aware that people are struggling to make applications to the settlement scheme because of literacy and language barriers, because of digital barriers, because of lack of confidence and fear around the system. So what we found was extremely important was to be able to speak community languages. So my 3 colleagues that I work with speak community languages, are therefore able then to engage on a much closer level with the people that we're working with, and also then to allay any fears and provide reassurance to people around the EU settlement scheme and answer questions. We've found that the most effective way of working is direct community support. So before COVID, and we'll come to some of the challenges around that in a minute, we were working directly in community settings. So in community centres, libraries, job centres, really where people could access us in the best way. And we looked to see where that would be possible, where it worked, you know, and asked community members where is more accessible to you. We then support from the beginning, really. So, you know, being in contact with people, trying to understand what their fears are, and then starting to make the application. So that is to ensure that people have their ID, to support them with obtaining ID if needs be, then through to the application. There are some struggles for people around evidence, so we reassure fears within that and support people to gather the evidence, and then through to submission. Once the application is submitted, with it being a completely digital format, the challenges that people already had around digital access continue after that. So to be able then to find status, to access the status, and then to use the status afterwards is very challenging for people. So we continue all the way through to make sure that people then can use their status once they have it. We in Wales, we work very closely with the local authorities across the country, and particularly in the urban areas where there are more Roma community members. As an example of that, we've worked closely with Newport City Council, and with the education services, both within Newport, in Cardiff, and in North Wales, around around Wrexham, Flintshire, and across. The benefit of working with people in education is that you can then interact with the the young people who are there, but also with the families. And what we've been able to do then, because then the education teams tend to have quite a close relationship with the families, is that we can have sessions in the school. So people will then come, find out information about the EU settlement scheme, be reassured that there's support there for them in home language. That starts to allay some fears, and then to start booking appointments to be able to work with people. The difficulty that we found, obviously, is COVID-19. This has presented many issues because we haven't been able to work face-to-face for a long time. And for community members who are already quite, don't have the confidence to go and do the application digitally, this remote working has caused a number of issues. And we want to highlight this because, the country is again in lockdown. This has caused a lot of stress for people, which means that engagement face to face, once restrictions lift, is going to be something that will really, really support the community. And I can't really highlight enough just how effective and supportive towards the community this direct community engagement is, where you take yourself to where the people are in order to make the system as accessible as possible. This gains trust. In home language will also gain trust, and then it's difficult for schools as they start to reopen. There's a number of issues that they have to face anyway, but having built up the relationships that we have, we know that we're in a position that when that lockdown does ease, that we can move back into those settings, and we were able to do that just before Christmas, before the lockdown happened there with Newport City Council, to work in a community setting. It was a community centre that that people were already aware of, already accessing pre-COVID, and so quite rapidly, once all the risk assessments were made, we were able to go back out and people came in, and we did that as a multi-agency approach. And so I think what is important is then, to understand where people are, where are the accessible places for them, approach people in home language, and work then with the local councils to have an understanding of the community, but also to bring that understanding to local councils if perhaps it isn't there. We have been fortunate in Wales in that there is a lot of support that we have had. We know it's not always the case, but I think that this collaborative working, can bring a lot of positivity into the work that we do, and also, that by extent is very positive for the community. So yeah. So to sum up, language is extremely important. Reassurance is extremely important around the EUSS and deadlines, and setting up relationships, finding out where you can work in the best possible places for the community, so that when lockdown eases, it will be possible to be there and to kind of hit the ground running. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Hayley. Can I just ask a quick question from you before we open up for questions more generally? I mean, you said you'd been doing outreach through schools, and that reaching people in their home language is important. Have you found that you? I mean, I suppose ideally you'd work with teachers or people who are already embedded in the community who have the local languages. Did you find that was always possible to find teachers or staff at schools who had those language skills?
So for us, on the whole, the teaching staff, so teachers and teaching assistants, tend to have that. There are a number of in education in Wales of the ethnic minority support teams that exist from the councils that are in the education system. So that does happen, not always necessarily, and not always all of the languages, that perhaps the community speaks. So within that, then, by reaching out to the young people, we are able to, with the trust that exists with the families and the schools, the parents will still come in. And with the languages that we speak within our team, we're then able to interact with the parents. I know that a lot of people will perhaps have something like Language Line that they can set up. And I'm not sure how it works in England, but I know that in Wales, there's also local authorities are set up to have translators and interpreters who can be available. So I think that definitely if the language is not available within the team, or perhaps not available in the school, that the local authority would then reach out through its network of language provision, which again, I can't speak for England. We're working in a devolved nation, but it's something that that for us is kind of embedded through the system. So it's definitely worth asking that question as to who speaks languages within school, who is available as well, because often teaching staff have commitments elsewhere. And then, working with the local authority to see how they can support with that. So it's definitely a joined up approach. And I think that communication and collaboration is really important.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we'll open up for questions. So either post the question in the chat, and I'll read it out, or else you can. There are 73 of us in the meeting, so I'm not sure I can pick up everyone, even if they put their hand up. Try and post in the chat first, and then I'll keep an eye out for people putting their raising their hand. Okay. While we're waiting for questions, I can't see any questions yet. Tanya, can you talk a little bit about the outreach work that you have been doing in London with rough sleepers, and what you found was effective there with the group of Roma who are rough sleeping?
Yeah, so I helped a few Roma rough sleepers to do their EUSS application. I mean, firstly, it required quite a lot of intense intervention work in that many of the applications that they initiated either we couldn't retrieve them, or they weren't able to finish the process. So it was very difficult to outreach them remotely. So more often than not, I had to ask to see them face to face, and yeah, so face to face, which required, also during the lockdown period. And I'm just because it happened quite some time ago, and so so I asked them to so they required face to face, and also interpreters, and quite a lot of follow up work. So any the documents that they have very often is very fragmented, very insufficient most of the times. So more often than not, the charities that have helped them in some ways are required to do supporting letters. Also, a lot of them used to, well, they kind of, they're churchgoers, so they attend church regularly. So we had to liaise with the churches locally, again, to write supporting letters to support their EUSS applications. And I think those were the main documents, and quite a few of them had ID cards. Some of them had expired ID cards, which again made the process quite challenging. And in the cases where they had ID cards, we could apply for the EUSS process online. So we were able to do that online. And in some cases, we had to do paper applications. And in those cases where they didn't have appropriate or valid IDs, we had to do paper applications. And again, it was difficult to do the follow-up work because of the precarious nature of how rough sleepers their lifestyles. It's been very difficult to do with some of them, with some clients, some of this follow-up work. So in terms of submitting, it's a fairly straightforward process if you can see them and if you can manage to get these supporting letters from either local charities or, as I said, churches. And for a lack of ID, the only way that you can overcome that obstacle is by doing a paper application, which again is a very long process. As far as I know, I haven't received any news from the paper applications that I've done so far. And as I said, I've done this quite a while back. But that's kind of those ones were the main challenges that I encountered with rough sleepers. And I don't know if Ilse, you want me to talk about children of people who've got indefinite leave to remain.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to cover that, but we can maybe take that a little bit later because we have quite a few questions coming in now. I mean, maybe you can just say something about paper applications because you work. You've done quite a few of those, haven't you? And you work with the Home Office EU Settlement Resolution Centre on those. So our paper applications, the preferred way of dealing with people who have no valid ID.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. I've gotten in touch a few times with the EUSS grants team via email, and after looking into various cases which I've conveyed to them, I was advised to go to do the paper application route. Unfortunately, because of the nature of it, it takes a very, very long time for them to process it. And as I said, I haven't got any outcome from those applications as yet.
Yeah, I mean, we know that quite a lot of Roma applicants, particularly during the pandemic, have had trouble obtaining valid ID, or they either they don't have a valid passport, or they have a national ID card, which I think is the case with a lot of Romanian Roma. Is that right? So people may not be able to obtain valid ID, but as we say in the toolkit, it's often a good idea to just start off the paper application process and then try and obtain either give alternative evidence or try and obtain the ID later on from the embassy. There are quite long waits from some embassies. Tanya, which embassies have we had problems obtaining ID from?
To be honest, with all the clients I've worked with, we've all had, my experience is that I haven't worked directly with embassies, but I know that my clients have tried to make appointments or to go to embassies, but due to the current situation, it's practically, they're finding it almost impossible to go to the embassy or the consulate to have a renewed form of ID. It's become really, really difficult. So I'd say most of them, there is a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
But then the Home Office does accept expired IDs at the moment. They are accepting expired IDs. Yeah. If they have any ID.
Yes, I mean they've of course some people don't have any ID at all, but the Home Office have informed us that they have discretion to accept expired IDs, and they will, particularly in the case of older people, accept IDs that are no longer valid. But you do have to go through the paper application process. So we have a question here from Nadine Handley, who asks, many of our families still haven't applied for status. What will happen to education places if parents don't apply? So I assume that's education places in the coming academic year, and parents have until the 30th of June to apply. So Hayley or Tanya, are you able to respond to that? Let's, shall we go to Hayley first?
In terms of access to services, I think this is the biggest concern that we have for people who are not making the applications before the deadline. Currently, we're waiting to see if there is guidance that does come from the Home Office around non-applications. We know from what Tanya's just said, it's very, very difficult to get ID at the moment. It is the process, quite a long process when you eventually even get the appointment, and then you have the process to actually make the application. So there is concern that people won't be able to apply in time. What happens after that at the moment, we're not 100% sure, and it will be a decision based on access to services, and whether people, will on reasonable grounds be able to make an application later on. What those reasonable grounds are, we don't know. So the answer to that, and maybe a more definite answer, but I think from what we've seen is waiting for Home Office guidance as to what it means to people who aren't able to apply before the deadline, and what will be classed as a reasonable grounds for not applying.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Phil Veazey here. Is the deadline at the end of June? Yes, the deadline for applying to the EU settlement scheme is the 30th of June. And what percentage of the community will be affected if we don't act ASAP? Mihai, can you take that one? Because I think you have a good idea of how many Roma people have not applied, and specifically also how many Roma children haven't applied to the settlement scheme.
Well, first of all, it's very difficult to make a clear assessment of how many people have not applied yet. But because we have quite a lot of experience engaging with people from our communities around EUSS, and seeing what is this, let's say, current situation. One thing we have done is that we have organized, obviously when this was possible, quite a lot of EUSS sessions, traveling in different places in the country and in London. And based on that sort of experience, during each sessions that we had, we've seen people not knowing, having no information about the EUSS, and we've seen people who had no valid documents or no other documents helping them to make applications. And based on that assessment, we believe that it can be 15 to 20% of the community who is still not aware of the EUSS, who still not have not made applications and so on. We are still seeing now people who are not aware of the scheme. We are now starting to get more complicated cases with people who have any sort of documents and so on. So it's just an assessment based on our experience working directly with the people. Ilse has mentioned at the beginning that the community is around 200,000 in the UK. We believe this is an underestimate, but that's a different discussion. I hope that's answered.
Thank you. There's another question here from Kirsty, which is an interesting one. Maybe that's one for you as well, Mihai. So in Dorset, there's in Dorset where she works. There is a representative from the local travellers charity, which has been on their outreach team. The feedback from her is that there are not that many Roma people in the area, but it seems, I suppose it seems likely that there are that there are a number of people who need to apply. So if the local Gypsy Roma traveller organisations are not well informed about the Roma community in particular, how do we go about finding the people who need help? I mean, there are other ways of contacting people as well. Maybe you can say a little bit about what they are, for example, Roma churches.
So first of all, I think it needs to be clarified that Gypsy, Roma and Travelers are three different communities. And although we are all grouped together, and although there is some sort of similar identity between Roma and English Gypsies, it is not always working to have someone from a traveller or a Gypsy charity reaching out to Roma. In many cases it does, because we do work together with Gypsy and travel organizations, but not in all the cases, and this might be the case in Dorset. I am not aware of having a big Roma community in Dorset. We are aware of where people are located, more or less. But if, for example, if I would be to reach out and to find out where the Roma are in the area, I would check with schools if they have Roma pupils on roll. I would check with local authority if they are aware of Roma families in the area, especially you know, some local authorities have Roma children in care. I would check with a local authority and maybe with the police if they are aware if there is a Roma church or not in the area. And also I would simply go maybe on streets around car washes, maybe food processing factories, and simply check if there are Roma around there as well. Usually we see in car washes quite a lot of Roma, but obviously in this sort of circumstance there's not very much possible. So I hope this gives you, Kirsty, gives you an idea of where you can start from.
Yeah, I mean, we also mentioned in the toolkit that you might have said that as well, that Pentecostal churches and Jehovah's Witnesses, if you have local branches of those, are often have Roma members. But it sounds like, you know, trying a combination of approaches is the best way, and particularly going through schools. Okay, so there's a question from somebody else on supporting people who have only worked, who don't have adequate documentation and only worked cash in hand. Tanya, can you take that one?
Yeah, so we've had, yes, in that case, if people that have had cash in hand jobs, again, I think if they have any way of proving their residency via a letter through any organization that they might have been in touch with, any supporting organization, that's the way I've managed to overcome that challenge. Also, we also have a very good partnership with the PILC, Public Interest Law Centre. And in many cases, I have referred particularly difficult circumstances of clients where they do have a history of work, but where they only have cash in hands. And so through engaging a lawyer that took that on, we were able to we were able to make a case, basically. So that can also help. Again, it depends on if you can leverage on all the partnerships around the person to find what is the best way to support them.
I think important is to know that as long as people have been in the UK before 31st of December, they are eligible. So it doesn't matter if they work cash in hand or not, or in different other forms of work and so on, they can make application. It's a different problem when regarding the evidence that they can use.
Yeah, great, thank you. We have a question here from Daniel Balaz about extending the deadline. Is there a possibility of extending the deadline, and what will happen after the deadline regarding EU citizens who have not managed to secure their status? I mean, I can partly answer that, and maybe Mihai can add to it. I mean, Roma Support Group and a lot of other organisations have been campaigning for giving all of EU citizens automatic status. The situation we have at the moment is that people have to apply. As you probably all know, the EU settlement scheme is an application scheme. And if people don't apply by the 30th of June deadline, they will lose their legal status in the UK. You probably all know what the consequences of that are. People will not be able to legally work. They will have their driving license revoked, bank accounts closed, and so on. So every time we bring this up with the Home Office, they say that they are focusing on getting as many people to apply before the deadline as possible. Hayley mentioned before that that there are organisations have also been pressing for for having as many reasonable grounds for applying late as possible, so that if people end up without a status and find that they have to apply after the deadline, that is possible for people, and that they don't have their legal status interrupted. So so far the Home Office has only been willing to concede in a very few number of cases that they might allow people to apply late, and that's in the case of children in care applying late, and they will also exercise discretion in for domestic violence victims and for adults who don't have the mental capacity to understand what the EU settlement scheme means for them. So those are the only groups that they've been willing to give guidelines on reasonable grounds about, but we're continuing to press for either an extension of the deadline, depending on how many people have applied by the deadline, or being as lenient as possible to people who apply late. So we're continuing we're continuing that work. I hope that's helpful. Mihai, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Not really.
And also, sorry, because the person I think also asked what's going to happen. I mean, we've already had cases where people who have not applied, clients of ours that have been living in the UK for over 20 years, who are not now able to access basic services. So that's is already happening in terms of I think the person was asking about the aftermath. Yeah, so basically access to service is going to be very problematic.
And what about benefits, financial benefits? I assume that's the same.
Well, yeah. That is the same. Yes, and kind of from health to welfare benefits to various services. It's going to become very, very difficult, basically.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm looking here. Any other creative, innovative ways to promote the message around the EUSS to Roma communities before the deadline, so they have plenty of time to apply? What we do in that regard is that we work with people from the community to pass on the message. Roma Support Group has done quite a lot of effort developing videos around the EUSS in the community language, but it's not enough just to develop the videos. You need to find the right way and the right channels to distribute those videos. And what we see for example, working with people from Roma churches is a very effective way. Working again through schools to distribute information, it's very helpful in that regards. But I think it makes so much difference if people can put some resources in place when reaching out to a church, when reaching out to a trusted community member, in order to share that those resources. It makes a huge difference when this is in place, because most of the times trusted people from our community would mean someone who works in a factory, a delivery driver, I don't know, someone who works really long hours, maybe a big picture vendor, these sort of people who would greatly appreciate any sort of appreciation of their time, given that they might take time off their work in order to support your own work. We have found this a very efficient way to reaching out to people. So we have identified people in the community and we have resourced them to help us reach out further, and it was extremely efficient.
Yeah. Someone's asking about whether it's possible to have, with students having IT access, doing online education now, is it possible to have an online session for schools to support application as the angles provided? I'm not sure what that means, but Hayley, do you know of any organisations that have been doing school application sessions online, and do you think it's practical?
So we've been having conversations about this. What we do know is that digital education has been a real challenge for the pupils from Roma backgrounds. I know that in some councils they have rolled out the use of computers and sent computers to households, and then dongles and a way of being able to connect to the internet. But prior to that, there was real difficulty because people generally didn't have computers or iPads, and access to the internet is quite reduced. So up until now, that has been quite difficult to do. I think it was something that we have been talking about with different schools, and if there's a way of being able to kind of do that after lockdown, once people are back in, but kind of congregating is also quite difficult. I think, from what Mihai said in terms of the videos that Roma Support Group has produced, I think by looking onto the Roma Support Group website and finding those videos and sharing those videos with the people that you know, sharing them with education. This can be a way of being able to send it out. The files are smaller, therefore can be more accessible, can be shared on social media, which is more accessible to community members. You know, I would say reach out to education and education services, find out what digital access is like for all pupils. We do know that there were work packs that were being sent out to some students who didn't have that digital aspect. But I think in this lockdown, things have kind of, you know, ramped up a bit more in terms of support around that. So it's something that can start to happen and something definitely to be looking at. I would say in the meantime, to ensure that all of this is in community languages, then the resources on the Roma Support Group have been very helpful.
Great, thanks. I want to make sure that we cover children of ILR holders and the specific problems that they face. So Tanya, do you want to give a quick summary of the situation that those children of long-term ILR holders who came to the UK before the accession of Eastern European countries, the problems that they face, and how you've been dealing with those people, because that is a problem that's quite specific to the Roma community.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is very relevant for our Polish Roma community communities, and at least that, you know, that's my experience. And we have a few cases, quite several of them, in fact, of parents that came here, as Ilse said, before the accession, who have indefinite leave to remain letters. Now, again, in theory, the children of these people should have been on the ILR letters, but they are not. More often than not, they're not listed in the letter. So it is a case. The way I've been kind of getting around it is I've been doing access subject requests for people to get their indefinite leave to remain. Again, very often some of our clients lose the letter. So first of all, I need to request for a copy of the letter to be sent to them. So I submit a subject access request, and on that basis, I've done a few. Children of ILR are entitled to become British citizens. So on that basis, we've been doing British passport applications for children whose parents have got ILR. Again, we are in the process. You know, this is fairly new, so we are in the process of working this out and actually finding out if the passport office they themselves might not know this. So you know, so we're in the process of doing that now, and so either British passports or yeah, I think that's mainly what I've been doing, trying to get British citizenship for them. I'm thinking also about people that don't have IDs, and in that case, many children of ILR might not have any IDs whatsoever. So in that case, I've been working towards making applications for simple things such birth certificates. So having a birth certificate will then allow us to to go further. But that's what I've been doing so far. Don't know if you have any questions, but yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning here that from our experience, these children of who are descendants of people with ILR are today they're EU citizens, and they themselves and their families are not aware that they have to do something about their status, and this is why we raise this point here, because we are already seeing these people having problems because of that. Especially last year when everyone was asked to make universal credit applications, we have seen people being refused based on their immigration status when they were saying that they are the son or grandchild of someone who had ELR at some point. And this is why we think it's important for this point to be mentioned. We see this situation especially with Polish and some Slovak Roma, occasionally with others as well.
Yeah, great. So there's a comment here from someone who is working with people that want proof of the right to remain and is having trouble explaining to people that it's digital only. I mean, again, we, Roma Support Group has been campaigning against the digital only status, which is, as you might know, is specific to EU citizens who will only be able to prove their status online. But the Home Office has so far blankly refused to even consider providing physical proof. I think the best thing that advisors can do is try and help people to manage their digital status, both as far as reapplying if they have settled status, both as far as reapplying is concerned, and also supporting people to get their own email address so that they could control the status that they have and they're not relying on a family member or perhaps someone they don't know very well to manage their digital status for them. Again, there are pointers in the toolkit about how to try and support people, but there's no doubt that people are, particularly the Roma community, with the literacy and barriers and digital exclusion, a lot of people are going to have trouble managing this this digital only status. There's a suggestion here from someone who's planning to reach out to care homes via letter, so sending resources in the mail, because it's hard to build up relationships at short notice, and the EU settlement scheme isn't a priority with COVID and so on. Hayley, have you what work have you been doing to reach out to care homes, and has that tactic worked? I don't know if that's specific to the Roma community, but maybe you could say something briefly about that.
So we haven't reached out to care homes necessarily. I think within the community, families are, living together, and we haven't found that there have been many people necessarily in care homes, but we have been thinking about, and we're working with other EUSS organisations as to how best to reach people in general. And I think, it's true around COVID, what we found was that the priority that had been focused on the EUSS shifted because COVID, was such an acute emergency for everybody. And I think that care homes are particularly difficult because obviously of the risk to care home residents of being able to enter, and the huge focus that there is on COVID right now. It seems a great idea to start to send out material, to follow that up with a phone call, and to start to build these relationships. It may not be the case that people are looking at it directly, whilst we're still in the middle of this lockdown, but that should hopefully ease quite soon. And if the relationships are in place already, if people have already had that information given to them, I think that it's much easier then to kind of hit the ground running when we do come out of lockdown. So any groundwork that people can do with any organisations, any centres, care homes, now is the time to do it. It can feel that perhaps people aren't as focused as they were on it, but as an example of what happened last time, you know, during the first lockdown and the concerns that people had, there wasn't much focus on the EUSS, but as that started to ease a bit, the focus came back onto the EUSS, that people were then able to start engaging within that as well. And I think that the real priority in terms of that communication is to make people aware that they must apply. Previous communication from the Home Office was about, you know, make sure you apply, you know, it's a good idea to apply, but that communication has also shifted now to a much more, you know, you have to apply to this, and also then to be able to detail, you know, what will happen if you don't apply to it. I think in the case of care homes, the difficulty can be with people who perhaps, you know, have reduced capacity, which is not the nicest word to say, but in cases of dementia or Alzheimer's, people are not, you know, obviously aware that they have to make these applications, but they will still be affected if, you know, they have retained their European nationality. And so what is important for people to kind of understand within those settings is that those cases are a lot more complex, and people will face more difficulties in making applications, you know, around who can make the application for them. So it's important that people in settings are aware of the EUSS, even if they can't do anything right now. At least the wheels have started turning in motion to be able to provide that support afterwards, and that all providers are also aware of the complexities around applications, perhaps for people who are living in care homes, and that they, you know, have partners in place who are registered to OISC level 2 and level 3 to be able to come in and provide that support as well.
Great, thank you. I'm aware that we're running a little bit over time, so maybe we should, Mihai, can you launch our final
sure.
poll so
Sure.
that people can fill it in?
So we have a few more questions, which I am launching now. And while we are doing that, I'd like to add something to what Haley has mentioned, and the point regarding letters. There is a good example which I'm aware of from Liverpool, where the local authority has sent letters directly to families, but the way that they have done that made the whole difference, because the letters went to families actually from the schools, and the local authority has involved Roma advocate in this process, who was going and dropping the letters to the families. So it's very important, and if you want to go through that route, it can be efficient, but people have to recognize where the letter is coming from. If they will see, you know, something on it which they've never seen before, it's very likely to engage with it. If it's coming from the school, from someone like the school, it can be very efficient way of doing it. And involving people from the community, again, it's extremely important. And also, if you want to make that involvement efficient, we cannot say, you know, we cannot emphasize this strong enough. Resources need to be put in places for these people, because they can make huge difference when engaging to Roma, and I can give plenty of examples about that.
Yeah.
I will launch now the next question as well.
Okay, great. There's one last, I'd encourage people, since we're running over, to quickly post any final questions they've got, or any points they think that we've missed. Any known Roma organisations in Cornwall, we can follow up on that one. There's also a question of whether all councils have been allocated funding to support the EUSS process. No, they haven't. There are the Home Office has released funds to support outreach to specific vulnerable groups. Roma people are among those groups, and in total 72 organisations I think have been funded, of which around 50 are funded to support Roma organisations, but there is not the Home Office hasn't provided funding to all councils to do outreach, although some councils are doing outreach anyway, in recognition that it is going to benefit the community as a whole. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. If there's anything that that we've missed, then we will follow up after we finish. Mihai, do you have anything to say about the polls?
Yes, we have one more question, and I am launching this now. And while we are doing that, I would also like to mention one last extremely important thing, and that is in regards to what is happening after people make the applications. Last summer in August, Roma Support Group has supported new Europeans in doing a research around the digital status, and we were aware that the problem is significant in the Roma community, but we have, through the research, we have seen how serious this is, and we have seen that anywhere between 70 to 80% of the Roma applicants are not aware of how to access their status after they make the application, how to prove it, how to update it, and so on. So this is a hugely significant problem which will affect many after the deadline. If there is any way you can put some resources in place to ensure that people are aware that their status is digital only, and any information regarding how people can access their status will be hugely needed. I will put here in the chat box a link to the research we have done with Europeans, which includes information that will reflect the situation of those from the Roma communities as well as those elderly people, as the research has focused on Roma and elderly.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that people need advice on how to reapply for settled status if they have pre-settled status. So it's good to include that. Again, we have pointers to how to manage that in the toolkit. But it's a good idea to include information about how to reapply in your initial session, because if people with pre-settled status don't reapply for full settled status within the 5 years, they're going to lose status altogether. And again, we're concerned that this particular community is at risk of not doing that. Okay, great. We'd better finish up now. We're going to have a yes, settled have great resources. That's a good point. We're going to, as I said, follow up on any questions in the chat that we might have missed. And we're happy to follow up with you in writing. Meanwhile, I'm going to post my contact details and Mihai's contact details in the chat if you have any questions that you want to follow up on. So, sorry, I don't have a copy paste. Great. Thanks very much, Mihai. So I'd like to thank our panel for a really good discussion. We'll follow up with you on any outstanding questions, and thanks very much for attending. Please do get in touch if you have any questions about organisations in your local area or anything else you'd like to follow up on. So thanks very much, everyone, for participating, and see you soon, we hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Mihai, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I also dropped in the chat box a link to our YouTube channel where we have all the resources that we develop, not just EUSS related. You'll find that all sorts of different videos.
Yeah. Have we got all the responses for the polls before I shut everything down? Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.